Greetings. Vijñāna-bhairava-tantra, verse 72. And this is the third to last verse of the bliss practices. And also, we're now experiencing this conceptual crossfade I mentioned in the previous video towards daily life practices. So this verse is about the bliss arising from savoring, fully savoring and experiencing food and drink, eating and drinking. And so in that sense, it's a daily life practice. This is an opportunity that comes up in everyday life. And it's also one of the bliss practices to fully experience the joy of delicious food and drink. So let's encounter the verse itself. Jagdipana krutolasa rasananda vijambhanat bhāvayed bharitāvasthāṃ mahānandas tato bhavet. One should meditate on or feel fully into the state of fullness that expands because of the delight of savoring that arises while eating and drinking. And that joy will become sublime. So this particular verse is one of a number of verses in this text, in this tantra, which very much correspond to people's modern ideas of what Tantra is all about. So in the 21st century, people tend to think Tantra is about sensuality and or sexuality, and that it's mainly about bliss and expansion of consciousness through sensual experience. And that certainly is an element of original classical Tantra, but not such a prominent element. In fact, we tend to find this element of sensual experience as a gateway to expanded consciousness much more in the writings of the Kashmiri tantrikas than elsewhere in the tradition. And it's also very much present in the Sri Vidya or branches of the Sri Vidya. But really, Tantra was, in most of its lineages and most of its branches, primarily a ritual technology and a meditative technology. Right? Yoga at that time meant meditation, meditative practices, awareness cultivation, working with the energy body. Yoga was almost an entirely internal affair at the time. And this emphasis on sensual experience, we really find in the classical tradition much stronger in the writings of these Kashmiri masters than elsewhere in the tantric tradition. Having said that, it is very much a significant feature of this text, of the Vijñāna-bhairava-tantra, as well as its sequel, the blossoming of innate awareness, Svabodha Manjari. Okay, so let's look at the verse in a little more detail. So the first line, the first half of the verse is a slightly complex compound, Jagdipana pratolasa rasananda vijambhanat, which means due to the expansion Vijambhana, due to the expansion of the bliss or delight of savoring, which arises due to krutolasa, eating and drinking, jagdipana, due to the expansion of awareness into the delight of savoring, rasa ananda, that arises due to eating and drinking. There comes about this state of fullness, bharitāvasthāṃ, that one should meditate on or feel fully into. Okay, so that's the Sanskrit kind of order, and in English it makes more sense to say one should meditate on or feel fully into, bhāvayed, the state of fullness, bharitāvasthāṃ, that expands because of the delight of savoring that arises while eating and drinking. Jagdipana kritola sarasananda vijambanat. And that joy will become sublime. Mahānandas tato bhavet. So the verse, the interpretation I first had was that we should understand this to mean when you're savoring the most sublime and delectable food and drink, then you should go deeply into the experience. But then I realized, well, the verse doesn't actually say that the eating and drinking needs to be of the most expensive gourmet quality. It actually just says jagdipana, eating and drinking. And so someone in the Tantric Yoga Now group did the practice with a simple bowl of oatmeal or something similar, where he just fully went into the experience of actually truly savoring that food, truly experiencing it to the full. And then I realized, yeah, actually I was just sort of reading in an assumption. And this is something that's very easy to do as a translator. It's a trap that any of us can fall into, where we read in an assumption that's not actually there. And then, this is the beautiful part, through people experimenting and practicing, such as all of you in the Facebook group and on the YouTube channel, then we get to take another look at the verse, and I realized, oh, that I don't want to read anything in. It just says eating and drinking. Eating and drinking can give rise to, if you allow it, this rasananda, this bliss of truly savoring what you're tasting, which then can create this expansion of awareness, leading to the state of satiation or state of fullness that then leads to this great joy or bliss or delight. Okay, so this verse very much connects to and echoes tantric teachings, especially again in this Kashmiri variant of tantric practice, whereby you feed the goddesses of the senses, that each of the senses is sort of personified as a goddess power, and you feed the goddesses of the senses by fully immersing yourself in sensual experience, but not in an appetitive way, right? Appetitive is the adjective form of the noun appetite. Not a way where you're trying to you're objectifying the sense pleasure and trying to get more of it and trying to use the sense pleasure to kind of fill a sense of emptiness within, right? That's the appetitive mode. This is the aesthetic mode. The aesthetic mode is where you're experiencing sensual delight the way you would experience art, right? When you encounter great art, a painting or a sculpture or a piece of music, you don't try to devour it. You don't try to consume it. Well, I mean, in the modern capitalist culture, people become consumers of just about everything. But the aesthetic mode is a mode in which you're savoring the beauty of something without trying to sort of own it or internalize it or check it off a list of, your bucket list of peak experiences or something like that. You're not in this consuming mode. You're in this communion mode. That the aesthetic mode is a type of communion with the beauty of aliveness that is accessible through any of the senses when you fully immerse into the experience that you're having. So in the next verse, verse 73, we'll see this teaching applied to music and song. And here it's eating and drinking, where any of the senses can provide this opportunity for expanded aesthetic awareness that connects us actually to our deeper nature. Like consciousness has this innate capacity to experience its own fullness. And that capacity can be actualized through any sensual experience whatsoever. And this is a teaching in the Krama tradition, the Krama lineage, that actually, once you sort of get the hang of it, any experience whatsoever can be an entry point into this expanded state of consciousness where you're simply relishing the beauty of existence in that particular mode or in that particular form, whatever it might be. You know, sunlight filtering through the leaves of the tree, the howl of the coyotes at night. And I'm in Southern California at the moment. There's lots of coyotes here, and they make very weird sounds at night. And, or whatever it might be, you know, that there's a way in which we can be in this sort of categorical labeling mode. Oh, what is that? What is that? Oh, that's coyotes. Okay, I know what that is. Now it can be dismissed. Or this appetitive mode, let me get more of what I want. Let me consume, internalize, make it mine. And this teaching has to do again with this relishing of the aesthetic mode of consciousness, that there's a kind of extraordinary missed opportunity in modern culture, because it would seem that everybody is into the aesthetic mode, because everyone's into sensory stimulation in our culture. But it's much more in this appetitive mode, this consumerist mode, right? And it actually takes some self-discipline and training to shift from that into this aesthetic mode of appreciation. And by the way, a lot of people confuse the words ascetic and aesthetic. These are completely different words. They should not be confused. Ascetic means, with the C, means to be a renunciate, to renounce, whereas aesthetic with a TH means to experience beauty to the full. So they're almost opposite words, and yet they're confused. It confuses me that those words are confused, but there you go. So this is an invitation, right? Especially for those who aren't already doing this sort of thing, that as a tantric practitioner, you're invited to spend 5, 10, 15 minutes a day immersing in the appreciation of sensual beauty. And this doesn't require investment, expenditure. This doesn't require, you know, the most gourmet whatever. It could be just really immersing in a simple experience of beauty available through any wholesome food or drink or other sensual experience. And we'll come to many more of them as the text goes on. And by the way, does drink here include alcoholic drink? Absolutely, because in the tantric tradition, wine, meditation on the consciousness expanding effects of wine or rice beer, that is to say sake, it was much extolled. So pana here means drinking, could be any delicious drink, or any drink that you can savor, non-alcoholic or alcoholic. It's not specified, but the alcoholic is not excluded. Okay, so that's it for this verse. Enjoy. And by the way, if you're doing this practice in company, then it does require a certain kind of yogic discipline in which you sort of request your companions, hey, can we just take a moment and fully taste this, fully experience this? And then you find it's actually quite challenging for a lot of people in social settings to take 30 or 60 seconds of silence to fully taste what they're eating. But that invitation can be well received once it's fully accepted. Om.